Hello, 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 most beautiful stars. Hello, hello. Good day, good evening, good morning, whenever you're catching this. I am live, day late and a dollar short, truly, for edgarcayce on Reincarnation. I am Courtney, host of Stars of the Morning Light, and I am making sure that I am live. I see that Chloe came in and Big Dad Standing Tall, along with Seeker of Truth, are having a bit of internet issues, so they might not be in the chat. But good to see you, Miss Chloe. Happy birthday, by the way. Yes. We love birthdays here at Stars of the Morning Light. We love communicating with the chat. We love being with one another. Oh, I love birthdays. I hope it was spectacular for you, Miss Chloe. Definitely. I see that Lori came in. Good to see you, my dear. Now, those who normally follow Stars of the Morning Light, edgarcayce Life Skill Studies is usually on a Wednesday. This is, like I said, a dollar or a day late and a dollar short um, because of storms in northern Georgia yesterday. We were beginning to flood in places and creates more work for me. So, everyone that is going through the transitions of weather this year, please stay tuned to Stars of the Morning Light because I'm going to be covering the why and the how and what's it going to look like because it is definitely going to start presenting itself in 2025, the changes of the environment. All right, folks. So, this episode is actually kind of part two to last week. Normally, with edgarcayce Life Skill Studies, I do we record we talk about we talk about one of his resources, right? One of his books, one of his materials. And we are, of course, in the 1969 version of edgarcayce on Reincarnation or his biography. So today would have necessarily been his biography. I like bouncing back and forth because having that kind of time lapse between things allows people to catch up. Not everybody's able to catch this live, and it might take people 2 weeks to even catch up on one episode. So I like kind of going back and forth. This week, I am bouncing right off of what we talked about last week. And Edgar was in this material, edgarcayce on Reincarnation, the 1969 copy. We were in chapter 6 talking about kids, how to raise kids, what's it like with past life stuff with kids, what does all this mean? And there's a ton of case stories that they could pull from. We're going to be back in it because there was a lot of ground to cover, and honestly, I didn't think there would be until I really started getting into it and I went, okay, wait a minute. This is not just good for those who currently are parents who have children. This is also good for everybody to understand their childhood. And we're going to discuss even more so of that now. So, thank you, everybody that's come in. Secret of Truth 2 and Big Dad Standing Tall. Do not worry if you're having internet issues. I appreciate you having the willingness to be here. Chloe, Lori, good to see you. So, in one of the aspects of last week, and throughout most of Edgar's career as a reader, as a messenger, I don't really like saying reader, I'd rather messenger. He was continuously talking about these influences. Influences, influences, influences. And again, he brings it up with raising children. Hello, Kim. Good to see you, my dear. The reason I did not continue on last week is because of I wanted to start in this. Influence into child raising again, into aspects of possibly your life growing up that we can look at and examine through understanding how this all works and operates. And then also last week, I was kind of comparing kids who are born during war times, like World War times. I was also comparing that to kids that are born during what we just experienced as a society, COVID. I'm going to bring more light to all of that. Um, because, well, those kids are alive now. They're here. What's going on with them, right? So, going back to the source material, last week we read a section, and it's really about how Edgar had always, he stood firm. He was very firm in how he thought we as humans should raise children. And I gave a big example. Now, please, if you listen to the last video on this, that was not to um, be in any form disrespectful. And I don't think anybody took it that way. I respect all people who raise children, are there with their children, are doing the best they can because, whew, goodness, any parent can probably say, yeah, they don't come with a blueprint. How are we supposed to know? That is why many people sought out readings from edgarcayce to ask questions such as, how is the best way of going about raising this particular child? Because each child is different. Each child has different past lives. Each child then therefore has different things influencing them. Getting a reading is good. I'm just going to throw it out there. But regardless of the individual, Casey was very firm in how we should handle children. And really with the emphasis on those children are going to be adults one day. So we need to show them the respect and care as if as if we're preparing them for adulthood. And one of the things that was read, and I'm grabbing it here. Okay. I'll start with this. Nothing disturbed him more, so Casey, nothing disturbed him more than the parent who tried to force his own fears and prejudice down the throat of young soul entrusted to his keeping. The source of most neuroses in later life was this force feeding in childhood of illogical do's and don'ts, as if the child were merely a puppet extension of the parents' representation and frustrations. So we read a whole lot of it, and we are going to return to that entire section at the very end. But we kind of glanced over that part. So as I'm going to get into this concept of influences, past, present, all around, that is actually one of the most common that we do to each other, to our children, pass it on, pass it on. We influence things without even really being aware of it, especially with children, because they are observing all the time, observing, observing, observing. And we know this. We know this as a society. But here's the thing. Many of the listeners here at Stars of the Morning Light, we are older now. We are older. And so the influences that were there growing up, we are responsible for now. So I started something quite many years ago where I would ask myself, If a memory popped up in my mind and it was something that was kind of force fed to me, spoon fed even, an ideal, thoughts, um, ideologies that were not mine, and they came back in my memory, I would ask myself in that moment, is that of me? And the answer, because now I'm older, might be like, well, now it is. Now you lived within that influence for a very long time. So then I ask myself, would that have been mine? Like if the influence wasn't present, if that had never been told to me, repeatedly, most likely, but if that had never been present, would I have adopted that by my own right? Well, then I got to ask myself that, hand to heart. Would that have been my thoughts? And I will tell you, the majority of the answers are no. And I'm not blaming my parents. Like I said, parents do the best that they can. But a lot of times, parents are projecting their fears onto their children or their insecurities onto their children. Um, this is kind of a weird example, but it is actually one of the main examples that came into my mind and started this whole process of double checking with all the influences that happened in my life from teachers, parents, all like authority figures, bosses, what have you. I mean, I had a boss once who tried to very much teach me that the best way to influence people was by intimidating them. He was a very old school boss. Yeah, wasn't mine. I didn't really go with it, but yet and still, you see what I mean? Like there's so many influences. The one of the first ones was I grew up um with a lineage of women, right, in my family line who got pregnant very young and got married very young. And by the time my mother's generation came around, many of them definitely had to get divorced, bad traumatic relationships, what have you, right? So as a young girl growing up and you're sitting around listening to all the older women talking, aunts, mother, what have you, it was very much ingrained in me to basically stay away from relationships. In any form of like true intimacy was going to trap me. That's how it came across. It was going to trap me. You're going to get married by the first man that makes you feel good, and then you're going to be trapped and it's going to be horrible and you won't know how to get out. That was all of their words as a young adult woman growing up, and even young woman. Wow. That led to a lot of complications as I then developed into being a person because I was afraid. They put their fears onto me, what happened to them onto me. They were I lived with that and became a person that was not emotionally available to anyone because I was so afraid that if you're emotionally available, if there's a great deal of true intimacy, I would then get trapped and it would be abusive and horrible and my life would be ruined. That's what I received growing up. It did not fare me well. I then lived a very interesting existence, pushing everyone away for a very long time because it's all that influence seeped into other things. All that stuff. I wouldn't allow myself to basically be vulnerable with anyone. I was definitely a powerhouse woman of the 90s, right? And then all of a sudden, I realized how lonely that is and really had to work through that. That is an example. And I'm not saying that they actually were wrong. That was their experience, their life, and they were sharing. The way it was delivered, though, was don't you dare, Courtney. Don't you dare, because it's going to ruin your life. You might as well just never even have a boyfriend, a relationship. You do you 24/7. Well, then that also kind of fed into my ego. I definitely did me, trust me. So I'm using this as an example because then later in life, and I also became the female that would use men. I'm not going to deny that. I just used men because I didn't understand that there would be a relationship involved. And unfortunately, men deserved better than that. They really did, a lot of the men. Um, and it happens. Well, then having to go back and do a life review of all this stuff, I'm like, where did this stem from? Why was I always pushing men away, but then using them like the stereotypical they use us, right? I'll bite you first. Where did all of this come from? It came from that. It came from other people's fears put onto me. I took them in as legitimately. That's what's going to happen. You don't want that, Courtney. And then I pushed back. Okay, well, then this is how I'm going to live. Right? Girl power. I don't need anybody. I might use you. In the meantime, that's how it happened. It happens with children all the time, whatever the influences might be. It could be a parent that is not comfortable in their own skin. And the kid might, you might not even say it to the kid. You might support the child. You might, try to encourage the child. But if they often see you looking in the mirror, telling yourself how horrible you look, it's going to be an energetic influence. It's going to be them present in their life of doing the same thing. Kids are absorbing and absorbing. So, as an adult, and I'm doing this life review, and I'm like, I ask myself, would that have been mine? Would I have been so afraid to share myself with another person in my authenticity? Would I have been terrified of that if those words had not been present? And my answer was no. I would have never fallen into that. I probably, based on my astrological chart, based on this, based on that, I bring that up because it's going to come up today. Based on a whole lot of characteristics of who I am, that probably wouldn't have been present. Now, was my picker all messed up? Yeah, but I would have sorted it out. Oftentimes, things are not ours. So first I ask myself, is that mine? And me might answer, well, now it is because you've been living with it for 40, 50, 60 years. Then I got to ask myself, would that have been mine? Would I have, if I was born, when I was born, clean slate, if that was not an energetic influence, would I have picked that up? I will tell you, oftentimes it's a no. And then I ask myself one more thing. Well, regardless of what the topic may be, the influence may be, well, you've been living with it so long and you are now an adult. Would you like to keep it? That's a big thing. We might, as adults, understand why our parents told us this stuff that we didn't understand it at a young age, but now we're like, yeah, I should have listened to my parents. So as an adult, well, do I want to keep it? Like, is that of me and I like it being here and I'm good with that influence? And that for me, a 50-50, yes or no. If it is a no, then I hand to heart, my inner dialogue, me talking to myself, I'll say, whatever that energetic influence is, I reject that. That is not of me. I reject that. That is not of me. And then I go back in my memory, which usually sprung this conversation I have with myself to the first time I heard it, the multiple times I heard it, and I picture myself as that little one. And as I'm witnessing it in my memory, back playing out all the characters, all the words, all the energetic influence, I pretend, okay, we can all do this. I'm going to say the word pretend so it doesn't seem untouchable to do that you can do this. I pretend then in my memory that little Courtney goes, I reject that. That is not of me. Teenage Courtney says, I reject that. That is not of me. Young adult Courtney, when her boss is trying to convince her to intimidate others to get their work done, I reject that. That is not of me. I say it currently, and I go back in my memory and I say it then to start clearing out influences that we might be carrying around with us that our memories are trying to present that were never ours in the first place. They should never have been implanted, but things happen. It's kind of part and parcel to life here. I mean, we do need biology to happen to create a body for our souls to live through, right? So, people, places, and things, as Edgar and us have talked about, especially in the previous series about secrets of the universe and how to use them, as we learned, we choose the location that we're born into. We choose the family that we're born into. We choose some big pivots that we need to hit. Yeah, that first marriage you had, probably a soul contract. It's going to influence things. Mom, dad, sister, brother, all of them influence things. First big job. You're making that big paycheck for the first time in life. Pivot that needed to happen or a milestone, right? All of it. We choose a lot of this. With that being said, that doesn't mean that if it's not ours and we don't want it, we have to keep carrying it. That's not a thing. If we can acknowledge it, and usually our memories are trying to help us acknowledge it. So when memories come up, go, wait a minute, what are you trying to show me here? What are you trying to teach me here? Oh, I had really dysfunctional relationships in my youth because I was actually holding on to somebody else's fear about relationships. Hmm. Well, man, I don't need that. I reject that. That is not of me. And y'all, because this is some life skills, you can also use those exact words in any time and space of now. I use it all the time. If I hear something in the media, something on TV, something when I'm hanging around with people, family, whoo, all sorts of times and spaces that if it's like negative, fear, what have you, that I can sense, whoa, you're trying to come into my glory? I reject that. That is not of me. You can do it with all things. You can do it with all things because what we're doing is we're consciously stopping that from entering our energetic field. So then it doesn't even have an opportunity to get into the subconscious and the conscious. I reject that. That is not of me. See? So we can do it past, present. You can start practicing now for the future. It works, folks. It does. It helps to alleviate all of the influences. So we're not even talking about like the subliminal influences. We're talking about social, economic, even Edgar goes into the spiritual. He also goes into the galactic influences. He goes into the natural, like Mother Nature influences. There's so much energetic influence that is continuously filtering through all things. To be conscious of it and aware and start picking and choosing instead of just absorbing and living, we have that capability. I'm just wanting to make that very clear. Instead of just absorbing and then living it, we can become more consciously aware of when it's approaching or when we just heard it, when we're feeling it, and we can reject that. It's not of me. So, I see that Milky Way Soul Tribe came in. Good to see you, Robert. And parents, it happens. It happens because we're human and our parents were human, right? Um, at some point for my own healing process, I had to really. I think by the age of like 14 or 15, I was getting a lot of downloads, by the way, folks. Kind of built a little differently. A lot of downloads. And one of the downloads when I was that age, and really I think I needed it to continue on, was I completely understood that my parents had a life before me and my parents had a life separate of me. So a whole lot of what they did and who they were, and from actions, thoughts, behaviors, feelings, all sorts of things, had nothing to do with me. And truly, I think that was a download that kept me going. I needed that. But it is actually true. Our parents have an entire life before we come into play. And that's us acknowledging it at 40, 50, 60, right? We have to acknowledge these things. This is a part of the emotional maturity process that we go through. It's an aspect of a layer of healing, just an aspect of it, a layer of acknowledging that your parents are going to fumble all the time, all the time. And to the degree of what they went through is probably going to determine the degree of how well they were parents for you. And at the same time, while you're growing, changing, learning, developing, they're going through their own stuff. So, compassion to self and compassion to others. It's a layer aspect of healing. Because we tend to, as we grow up and mature at some stage, we tend to blame our parents for a lot of things. That's just everybody, especially in today's world. Um, when it's unfortunate because parents are doing the best they can as well, for the most part, the majority. So I wanted to make that clear. We can do check-ins with ourselves. So going into the energetic influences, there are a few case studies in this chapter that try to pronounce when young people, children, they're just drawn to stuff, or it seems that they're just, like accident prone. And I'm not just talking about those who are a little bit more active. And so, yeah, they fall over more. Those that are truly like actually accident prone, like, whoa, they just broke their arm. Oh my goodness. Now they just broke the other arm. Oh my goodness. Now they have a chipped tooth. That it's like you seem to be going to the hospital, get them fixed a lot. That could be energetic influences from past lives. Like they're kind of replaying it. And they're doing it at a young age to kind of work through it, get past it. I want to state right now, this is why I do the quantum timeline cleanses, is because I go in to your timeline, which is just a spiral of continuous lives, and I wipe all that crap away because we don't necessarily need it. If you're a kid who's accident prone, or maybe you were, it's actually not it's not beneficial of an it's not as beneficial of an influence as something a bit more dramatic. So all of our past lives carry some kind of energetic theme to it. And of course I'm going to say theme because I was an English teacher. But there's themes that reoccur and reoccur. And so if one of those is that you're accident prone, you don't really need to continue to live with that. You probably have been accident prone for many lives over. And there's nothing going in and stopping it. Energy will continue to move. Energy will continue to flow unless something stops it. Well, with a quantum timeline cleanse that I do, I not only stop it, I clean it away. I get rid of it. You are free from being accident prone. You are free from a whole lot of stuff, especially if it's not needed anymore. So there's always themes. It could be themes of that are based on relationship stuff. There could be themes of feeling trapped. There's definitely still in today's world, as we're about to talk about kids from war, because there's always been so much war. The themes that come out of war that we are continuously living is dramatic. It just won't stop, it seems. I clean up so much of that stuff. So before we get into that, because this video today is about the energetic influences. And they will not stop until we stop it. Could be that your child is like a jester. I mean, you got one of them wild kids. The teacher doesn't know what to do with them. They are a goofball. That's an influence from the past. It's not, it's something to develop in a child and teach them boundaries, teach them timing, teach them things with it, not to try to strip it away. Same with spiritual gifts. We don't try to strip them away. We help these young people develop, but with healthy boundaries with it. We don't just because we might be able to see it doesn't mean we say it. Things like that nature. There's so much to kids that are energetic influences and past life occurrences and things that are a part of who they are for this current life that have manifested for whatever reason. Same as there might be, you have a child or you were a child that you were kind of oddly obsessed with something. There's a case study in this material that talks about a young man that was obsessed with the water. They reported that the parents originally reached out to Casey because when he was a young boy, he would just disappear. He would just disappear, and then they would find him down by the river all the time. Like, why is he defying us? Why is he walking away to go be by the water? And the kid, they would find him and it's just, I wanted to swim. I wanted to be by the water. He had no other explanation. To the point that the parents reached out to Casey to find out where their son was because he never even finished high school. By the time he ran away, lied about his age to join the US Navy. He wanted to be in the ocean more than anything. He was obsessed with it to the point that he did not tell his parents that that's what he was doing. He ran away, lied about his age. He was like 14, but he lied and said he was 17 to get into the US Navy. The parents reached out to Casey to ask about where their son was. And in Casey's reading, he reported, "Your son lied about his age. He's actually in the Navy. He's out to sea right now." When the parents received that information, because the rest of the reading also spoke about he couldn't help himself. It was a compulsion almost that he had to be out in the sea. The parents understood because they raised the boy who, for some reason, it's dinner time and they always got to go down to the river to get him. They couldn't get him away from the water. He would skip school to just be at the water. It was a compulsion, an obsession. But it was stemmed from he had so many lives out at sea, being a all sorts of different characters, from captain to shipmate to all sorts of different stories, but many, many lives that he spent in the water. So the reading also informed the parents the reason he has this compulsion and that he just can't let go of it is because standing on land, walking on land, feeling the land below him is very uncomfortable. It feels completely foreign to him. He felt he had to. He had to lie. He had to run away because he just couldn't take being on land anymore. That is an energetic influence that, because it's been so many lives out to sea, there was nothing stopping those feelings. There was nothing to derail the compulsion to, I have to be in the water. We can find that within ourselves. We can find that with the children that we've raised. We can find all of these different energetic influences. And if it is something like that, it's a must. I must. Or you feel magnetized to a person, place, or thing. You keep visiting the same location over and over and over again. There's a reason. So we kind of roll with it and not against it. We kind of work with it, not against it. But we always check in. Is this healthy for me? Because we have very healthy influences and then we have not so healthy influences, right? And we can work with the healthy, we can reject the unhealthy, we can heal from the unhealthy, but they're all here for us. It's a part of our ongoing story. Ongoing. Same why some people might feel more inclined to follow one particular faith than another, or one particular course of study than another. Well, if you're drawn to something, work with it because it means you're probably already knowledgeable and skilled within it, and it will fulfill something within you. Like that young man who had to get out to sea. It was reported later on because Casey did a lot of follow-up with people as well. It was reported later on that his parents did contact the US Navy, got in touch with him. He sent a beautiful "I'm sorry" letter to his parents, but he just was compelled. He couldn't do anything. He wanted to tell them, but he knew they would say no, and he was living his best life. Sometimes when we feel that way, the compulsion, when we feel, I have to study this, I have to go here, I have to do that, I have to talk with this person, whatever it may be, it's usually because something within us, our heart, our mind, our soul, and even the skills at our fingertips are all saying, go for it. Good to see Chris came in. Good to see you. I hope everybody's having a great day. So keep that in mind, folks. Not all influences are bad. Not all influences that our parents gave us are bad, right? Not all influences galactically, naturally, all over the place are bad. But as adults, we have the responsibility of identifying which ones we're going to take in and which ones we're going to leave, which ones we're going to heal, which ones we're going to allow to still be present. Okay. So I do want to talk about kids at wartime. So Casey lived up into World War II. And a lot of this material of doing readings for kids, it was already happening, right? He was doing a lot of readings for parents, but when he started doing readings at that time, it shifted him greatly. I'm going to read a little bit, okay? And then I do want to talk about the similarities of like the children that were born as this chapter actually started. And it started with that last episode about this. The children that were born in 1943, 44, and 45 were going to be exceptional children. That is because they were actually born right in the heart of that war. We're going to be talking about the kids that pass away during wartime, and we're also going to be talking about those who were born during wartime again, because I need to bring it back to a lot of the energetic influence during a war like that is the same type of energetic influence like during our stint during the shutdown of COVID. Energy doesn't usually it's created by its identifying markers. It's given identifying markers, but all energy is actually neutral until it's said, your depression because of war, your pain because of war, and or your depression because of because of death, right? Your this because of death. So even though the circumstances are different, the energy that flows throughout people, places, and things can be very similar when there's a big disaster, war, pandemic. These are all very similar energies. So we're going to talk about the kids who passed during that time and the kids who are born during those times. Kim just said that yes, those born when the hippies were doing their thing. Yes, very interesting, those kids. And think about that, because I'm about to read from the material. There's always been war. There's always been war. There's always been heartache. I mean, we cannot really go back in history of what we know of recorded history, and there not be something. Civilizations wiped away, if you want to talk biblically. War between tribes, war between lands, all sorts of horrible, despicable things. And many of us, I actually will confirm this. I don't think there's been an Akashic reading on past life stuff and or even a quantum timeline cleanse that I am not discussing when that person lived through a war, participating in it, or we're on the outskirts of it. All of us, every single one of the souls present lived through something. Influence. So this is page 109, and it says children in wartime. Towards the close of his life, as World War II loomed darker and darker, Edgar Cayce's concern for the children who would be innocently caught in its meshes became more and more evident and urgent. He was not alone in the fear that the souls of children, bewildered by violent deaths, would wander in equal bewilderment in lower astral planes, unable to proceed towards the light, and that they would tend in their confusion to return to earth too swiftly merely for the sake of the temporary sanctuary of a womb. Okay, beloveds, I'm going to put that in today's English because that was written in 1969, written beautifully, but I'm going to put it in context for us today. And he was not the only one. Joan Grant, pardon me, Joan Grant, who was a psychic out of England, she was concerned about the same stuff. So I'm going to talk about this. Edgar Cayce Life Skill Studies was created so I could bring 100 years ago forward. So what they are saying here, and so Edgar was concerned, other psychics were concerned, mediums were concerned. When a child, and this might be a little bit hard to hear, but we do need to know this because I'm bringing it 100 years forward, and there's definitely reasons why we are facing certain stuff in our society of today. When children, when their life is cut too early, especially in violence or something tragic like an accident, that child, as they just said, I'm going to repeat the words, unable to proceed towards the light, quote unquote, and that they would tend in their confusion to return to earth too swiftly merely for the sake of temporary sanctuary of a womb. So what happens is when a child's life is cut too short, usually definitely an accident, violence, war, something of that nature. Because in that life, they were not able to meet at least somewhat of mature adulthood, that death will become very confusing. And because they still have the mentality of a child, young child, they will turn around real fast without picking choosing. Okay. There will be lack of, as I said in the beginning, we choose like these pivotal moments in our life. There's not really such thing as destiny. You are creating your own destiny. You're writing it every day. But if you want to use a term like fate, I'm okay with that. But do also know fate is just these bullet marks that you said, yes, I'm going to move to Maryland when I'm 22. That's it. All that happens in and around that, that's up to you on a daily basis. I'm going to marry this person when I'm 36. What happens in and around that, before and after, is up to you. These are big, right? These are big bullet points, I should say, in our quote unquote writing our story. Same as if I was an author right now and I wanted to create a story. I will tell you, from scratch, that's what you're going to start with. You're going to start with these big pockets, moment in time, scenes. The character now needs to go here. Then they will go there. Then they will do this. All the details, dialogue, scenes, all of it that lead the character into that and might get thrown out at different times. Nope, the character doesn't do that. Nope, actually, we're going to move that bullet point to here and we're going to put that at the end. That is what you are doing all the time. I'm sorry, folks, the light is bothering me. Same with your soul. So, yes, do you choose where you're born into? Yes, because that is environmental, social. All of the influences are very different in the different locations. Family. Lots of different family members or different soul contracts. I very much want to do a very big case study on this. Hard to find the participants. All who you marry, all sorts of stuff, education, first job. Those are big things that you choose. That is quote unquote fate. Okay? When a child, though, who is still in the energy of something and it happens swiftly, their death happens dramatically and swiftly. The energy of that child will not really choose to go to the light and rewrite their story from point A to point B of like, okay, I guess I'll hang out for a minute and select the parents right for what I need and figure all this stuff out. They're not going to do that. They usually come rapidly right back and they go, ooh, that person's about to have a child. I'm going to go there. Okay, over there. Let's go over there. They're seeking that comfort. They're seeking that womb. They're seeking that I didn't get a chance. And they come right back. Here's the truth of the matter, though, folks, then. When that happens, that child does not then have coming with them a really good sense of timing. They might have time blindness, one might say. I'm sorry, guys, if I get emotional here, I'm sorry, because this is what has happened. It might be very hard for them to make decisions and or foresee the future of things past like a day or so. It might be hard for them to verbalize how they think and feel, regardless of the age they might be now. All of the things that we now have titles for, from different spectrum, from different ADD, ADHD, all sorts of things. And I apologize. I didn't know I was going to get emotional about this. It is more prevalent now, let's say. Not like it wasn't there before. And it's not just because we have the internet here. It is in true form. There were children being born from my generation and younger that have aspects to themselves that are actually tied to the fact that their life was taken too soon prior. So they were not able to finish their story. They turned around way too fast. And it's like every day they're trying to catch up. Every day they're trying to seek what feels good. Every day they need security and structure. And I don't care if they are 12 years old, 22 years old, 42 years old. It's because the influence of war hasn't stopped. And now in our life, based on World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, it doesn't stop. Iraq, Afghanistan, it doesn't stop. Ukraine, Russia, doesn't stop. We are seeing all these souls now coming back, and they're coming back big time. Also, just accidents. Also, just things that would happen, like with the orphan train, that many of the viewers here would know. When a child's life is stopped short in a dramatic, traumatic way, they will immediately try to come back. And it then produces aspects in the current person that make it a bit difficult. So we have compassion for self and others. And I will tell you all, this I do know to be true from the Akashic. And if we actually look at this stuff and put in all the time frames, think about it, please. How many of us, maybe it wasn't the last life, but how many lives because of war did we maybe cut it short? And when I say short, it could be a 5-year-old, anyone from birth to 25. And if that happens over and over and over again, I know so many people in their 60s now in this current life who are lacking in emotional maturity. And it's really based on the fact that so many of their past lives, they were cut short. They didn't even make it to 25. They didn't make it to full adulthood, raising kids completely. And it could have been because they lost their life during their first childbirth at the age of 17, 18. It could be a car accident because we all know them cars were scary when they were first made. It could be farming accidents, could be war, could be anything. The reason that we are living in a world today, even though we have all of these resources, but it's very hard for us to emotionally and mentally, physically come to some kind of evolution and evolve where we think, quote unquote, we should be as a society and as an individual is based on the influences that the energy of cutting our lives short in traumatic ways, it hasn't stopped. That is what needs to stop. So I know that sounds kind of, I don't know how y'all might take that in. I don't know how. My husband has given me the right to use him as an example every time if I need to. He says, just go for it, Courtney. It's you that I care about, right? My husband is severely ADHD, and they do a lot of interesting things. They really do. How their mind works and operates. It's a beautiful mind. It's a great, intelligent mind. It's a fascinating, brilliant mind. As we're learning, many of the geniuses in our lifetimes were. But at the same time, There's lots of things that are difficult for him to just kind of, I don't know. He does his best in the standard society, but man, talk about time blindness, right? He's got it. Talk about social awkwardness. Talk about all sorts of aspects. Here's the thing, what I know about my husband. His life was cut short over and over and in dramatic ways. One of them was actually a guillotine. Dramatic ways, cut short over and over and over and over again. That is why I do quantum timeline cleanses. Let's get rid of that. So at least it's not present for the next one. And we really can come out shining. That is what I do know as true. The Akashic has expressed it to me, and every time I do a reading, every time I do a cleansing, it's just backing up what they said. The evidence is there. So take that in. Take that in for your own life, for children's life, for nieces and nephews' life, for all sorts of people's lives, for all sorts of reasons. When it is cut short, there will be problems. I want to point out that the case study that they went into about that then, um, for here we have a quick return to earth. He observed, so we're doing I'm going to do a quick little reading, okay? For here we have a quick return to earth. He observed, from fear back to fear through fear. He counsels that the child must be protected from all loud noises, darkness, and screams of sirens. Please take in what I just said to all of you. This is from a reading that CAYCE did, and it was for a child that was born in August 1943. That child died in war, came back quickly from fear, back to fear, through fear. What that means is they died. They immediately, swiftly came back through fear. That was their rationale. That's what they knew. They were so scared because they were young. They, through fear, made the decision, I got to jump right back in. And they came back to fear. Back to fear. I want to bring us back to the very beginning because that August of 1943, and so then he says, protect them from loud noises, darkness, sirens. He also says, be patient, do not scold, do not speak harshly, do not fret or condemn the body mind, but do tell her daily that she is loved. Isn't that what what we know now, how to be with the kids of today? Don't make too many loud noises. Let's have beautiful colors. They need colors. They need a safe space. I wonder why. So that case study was from August 1943. From that child who was cut too short, then rapidly came back because they were still afraid, who then was born into fear. At the very beginning of this chapter, it says, as will be seen in the not too distant future, the reading begins like this. All those souls who enter the earth plane in the years 1943, 44, and 45 will apparently be destined to fulfill interesting roles in their service to their fellow man and find a very unusual approach to the same. But yet, these are also the kids being born in 43, 44, 45 with that quick turnaround. Born, die in fear, make a choice in fear, come back to fear. I will tell you, that is also the same kind of energy that took place during COVID. People were dying, and people were dying in very fearful ways. And that kind of is regardless of the age. That was a very big situation globally. And as a society of now, however you want to judge it being handled, it was a thing. I've known many who passed away, and the majority of them were fearful. When we do pass, it is usually we're in fear of some sort. But there were kids. There were a lot of kids. There were also wars happening at the time. There were also a lot of things happening. So if you're watching this in the future, it was a very interesting time period to be living through that history. Cut short, in fear, decision in fear, back to fear. The kids that were born during that time, some of them, same turnaround, even if they were an adult, because the adult could have been in that amount of fear. It takes a very extreme amount of fear. But if you're dying because of something that you really have no control over and came through like a tidal wave, because that's what that was. It swept through the lands like a tidal wave. Massive amount of fear for yourself and everyone. They made a decision to come back pretty darn fast because they didn't want to leave in the first place. Doesn't matter if they grew to be that age, if the fear is still present. So they might be able to handle themselves a little bit more so. The kids who are old souls that are being born in the COVID. I love those kids. Those kids are amazing, by the way. Those kids are going to be amazing. Same as the kids from 1943, 44, and 45 who did these rapid turnarounds. Those would have then been the same kids, and I'll speak for the states here, that grew up to fight against all sorts of stuff, who really sought to change the world. They looked at the environment. Those are your freedom fighters, freedom riders in the 60s. They are your introduction to technology. They are the people, 43, 44, and 45, do the age, do the math, that were old enough to make the shifts and changes in the world that needed to happen. Are we perfect? No, but that's because the energy of war hasn't stopped. It needs to stop. Same as them, same as the kids being born into COVID. When someone is born in a collective energy of intense fear, death, depression, sadness, confusion, lots of confusion, When someone is born in a collective energy of that, they are either, if they were cut short, going to have aspects like they're on the spectrum or ADHD or what have you, or they are going to appear to be a very old soul from the get go. They are going to be talking about adult matters. And that is because the adults who passed away out of fear went, I don't really care what happens next time. Let's just come back. I didn't want to leave in the first place. So all these little babies that are being born could potentially be actually very grown. But they do 30 years later, which I am anticipating 30 years later, these kids, we're going to need them. We're going to need them. So I'm happy everybody was making babies. They are going to be the ones to influence a lot of things. So if you are new to Stars of the Morning Light, and if you are a new parent, somewhere within having a child in the COVID time period, they are going to be a very special group of kids. Very, very special. And we're going to learn how to work with the old soul, even if they're walking around like a grandpa. We're going to learn how to work with that energy and not against it. We're also going to learn how to work with the energy if it seems that they are just not getting things. That's okay too. That's okay too. Because in their own right, they are demonstrating to us a whole lot of stuff we might need to let go of. Influence, influence, influence. There's always going to be influences when we're born and throughout our lives. As adults, we get to pick and choose what we keep and what we get rid of. As a baby, if things went well, you have already picked and choose some pretty big details. But if things did not go so well, it's as if every day is new. It's kind of an ongoing theme in my house that my husband, because of his ADHD, truly taught me what it is to be in the now. What others have, and especially the kids now that are being born. They were born into a lot of fear. That does not mean that they will carry it with them. A lot of what they are going to teach us, a lot of what my husband has taught me, because he has a different kind of mind, we're going to need. So, all based on influences. All based on influences. And eventually, I do believe the negative influences will stop. I do believe so. And one more thing before I let you go. And so thank you for being here. Yes, Kim says honor and celebrate them. Definitely. Please honor and celebrate yourself. Honor and celebrate all the different minds out there and energies and individuals. We do make the world go round, and it's lovely. I'm going to leave you with just a little bit of Casey's thoughts. These cases, more than any other type, serve to emphasize that Edgar Cayce viewed the future in two quite separate ways. While the personal destiny awaiting a given soul may consist of the inevitable consequences of his own past actions, and thus lend itself to psychic predetermination. I'll keep reading, folks. The future can never be entirely preordained. Please know that Casey and myself are in full agreement that nothing is fully preordained. Once again, I don't really use the word destiny because people put a lot of emphasis on that word. So I kind of just want to get rid of it because how much emphasis is on that is not accurate. So let's say fate. fate, a simple fate. These little markers that you say, yes, I'm going to do that. I'm going to be the mother of that child. I'm going to be the father of that child. That sort of thing. That's soul contract fate. Nothing is predetermined, as in preordained. A given country, for example, has the power to alter and reshape its destiny in exact accord with the altering behavior patterns of that people of that country. So a whole nation, a whole country can change its landscape and its predicted quote unquote future based on its history by all the people that inhabit that nation country. Really. A strong, more determined effort on the part of the responsible German majority could easily have prevented Hitler's rise to power. Europe could have followed a saner, more serene evolution. The earthquakes, which threaten in California and South America, can likewise be averted by a swing away from materiality and social indifference on part of their inhabitants. Whoa, folks. People do not know how much, when we are together, inhabitants connected to one another in a land, it can affect things like earthquakes, fires, just disasters. So not only could we prevent tyranny, war, all sorts of stuff, we can also prevent things that people think we're not able to prevent, like an earthquake. And this is why here at Stars of the Morning Light, I am always trying to remind humans how powerful they actually are. And it is clearly written that if people would maybe let go of their material desires, probably stripping the land of assets and goods or what have you, mentalities, maybe we wouldn't have so many disasters. CAYCE never put it more clearly than he did in one of his lectures, given in his normal conscious state to the IRE prayer group. And do you remember that CAYCE was a Christian, so he will mention God in reference to the Christian God. A warning was once given to a man of God that a certain city would be destroyed. He said, but the man talked with God face to face, and God promised that if there were 50 righteous men, he would save it. Then finally, if there were just 10 righteous men, he would spare the city. I, as in CAYCE, I believe that the just people in the world keep it going. That just people are the ones who have been kind to other fellow, in patience, long-suffering, brotherly love, preferring their neighbor before themselves. When there are possibly 50 or 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000, then the way may well have been prepared for his coming. But all these just men must be united in their desire and supplication that the Christ physically walked among men. That is in one of CAYCE's lectures. He is trying to say, I don't even think it takes that many of us. It just takes us who have faith, who believe, who are good to our fellow man, that can shift the tides, shift what happens here, across the pond, in the pond, that can shift things. And this is, if you watched last Saturday night with Lucky Stone 888 and I discussing some aspects, he brought up that here at Stars of the Morning Light, I'm usually emphasizing everyone can ascend and have higher Christ-like consciousness. And I then turned to him, I said, I never said everyone. I said everyone has the potential. Do I think everyone will, though? Probably not. But I'm okay with that because I know it doesn't take that many of us. It takes 50, then 100, then a few thousand. We hope for 1,000,000. And man, if we even have a few thousand shifting into Christ consciousness on a permanent basis, let's say we have 500,000. That would be a nice number. I know everybody in the chat probably just went, I wonder if that's that 144,000. We don't need everybody, but we do need those who can and are willing to heal themselves and help each other heal, to truly change all of what can happen here. So, you You lovely listeners, you beautiful star, you are actually just as much of an influencer as anybody else. Because your energy also influences things. And if you're having not so good of a day with it, compassion to self and others, right? We have our down days, we have our good days, we have all sorts of days. Compassion to self and others. Do know you have a choice on how much your past lives influence you now, how much your past current life influences people, places, things. That horrible nun who would hit your hand at school growing up, how much does that actually still influence you now? And we have responsibility as to how we tend care for the kids of today and influence each other. Influence all around because all is energy. So thank you, everybody. Have a great, actually, I'll see some of you tomorrow morning, Friday, Valentine's Day at 11 a.m., Friday, February 14th, 2025. The topic will be healing in the age of AI. Healing in the age of AI. Ooh, what a wonderful topic. So, some of you, I'll see you in the morning. Others, I'll catch you on the flip side. Be that beautiful shining star. Influence yourself, influence others. Compassion, compassion. I'll talk to you all later. Bye, guys.